make them real. We are see opinion to me for dream bomu. Now see so die mumu. Won't go now bet you much would die. I say, won't soon wash me ya. But you dear Pemuka say, when ya me can see. Also, my four porno can send me. Also, me to me at the end, Jesus Christ, me dignity. In Tierra, dear, Fanny, dear Pemuka, and me, Bayamao, me, Yan Fanny, dear Prana, Samuzano, didn't to me, Bayam, my century, Kuano, on Mama Jam, what did it to me? Missy, oh, Mama Jam, what did it to me? Dear Pemuka, say. Mia, obey, 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 oh, ye can see you. Century, one, oh, ye passa, sisu, century, one, oh, ye passa, sisu, Freddy, dear Pemuka, say, Fadi, dear Pemuka, me, Mia, ye, oh, dream big and make them real. Century Yamitasi, Century Passasi, Su Century Yamitasi, oh, Century Passasi, Su Freddy di Pemucase, Freddy di Pemucane, Yami Bayamao, Mia Yewi. Oni papa se o yami ebi mawakai, eyakai no wakai. Oh, Kayami, Kaini, why you feel fit, yes, I'm busy, Osasido, Mumena, Nasiu. Adamunana say, oh, Yami, be my wakai, Ayakai, no wakai. Oh, Kayami, Kaini, why you feel fit, yes, I'm busy, Osasido. Mumena, Nasiu. Say, I feel Jeba. And so and Tony, I think Jabo, yeah, Nasu and Tony, and notice a pretty good, now that's so good. Aya, Mimia, Yamisa Sido, if you say I think Jaba, and so and Tony, I think Jabo, yeah, Nasu and Tony, and notice a pretty good, now that's so good. Yeah, Sumi Mia, Yamisa Sido, Annie, why ye be a mawu, why ye be, yes, why ye be, Ganasi, Yamisa Sido, can't when she a wunya, well, you say Yami Dora, a day now, Yamisi, Yamisa, and ye body I am for me, Yami don't. Any penny na nyanasa, any penny na nyanasa, be a ring on Tiapo, Euradia Mawadia, Nazira. I know see a dear young winter winning a make a touch, I be a fool, Pumpuni, that dear fool, be both you, Papa. Why could I be fire, Mano? Midi masi de yina be yenyum to asani.
Something but we're ready.
Okay. Then I go pass it. Say and then so the Abba, I be shame for her anyway. Now what we na education week. Yeah, you didn't come up. You show how to educate ourselves, how to empower ourselves. I want young couple and then young say professional and personal life so and so emo. And then that also and 9. There come some health and education. And now it's be brave. Yet Dr. George also my input and ra. Now and then young couple don't know. Or no. ɛna ɛdi anim ɛde ama yɛn. Na Dr. George obi a menim no personally kakra ɛnyɛ bebree, na the educational background is very, very extensive. Until your started on a where he's from and baby what we drew. Now on the program also at the Atwaso Amai. And some see kind and run or a Harvard medical graduate. Into a Brian Chehono. Mestre. Now a serpent and support you at the Ashina Coponsa. Now a serpent area the veteran cano Dr. George Agyapong. Serpent Mestre no bumpire at the Amai.
Yo, I didn't ask you for in Yami a bankers here. And then you made that was a papa. Sir, what that romantic, ye de cry young come. You may dear a shas ye a free and I know Cosiadano. Ye to us. Sabri, we had Jumedian in our air shawons. Na ye the openings so are over Cassan. Ye did not usher once. Na near Opese yensa ekano. One am no so de amayen. Na yen so esua bibi afrim na yafa bibi afrim. Na boa yi sisi ene ye da achi asetena. We ni empaibo, we ni adesede. Ya jinkwa pa Yesu Kristo odi mu nti. Amen.
Serpent here that's Dr. George Mestre na o asum at the Amai. Na yenta programs. That's
CP Kwame Richmond me Kwame Eyeminia from Ghana Mampong to me damasin CP say mama me this opportunity so me share in Jumedie. I'm very encouraged and inspired. Your whole week dedicated to education. Now, minya chance ba mo program no sunra. I had which sent me ba the other days because I can tell so I've missed out a lot. Now, so no, hopefully, in a bit more connected some of the yes, you be to wire into ye can upon some and specifically focusing on our health. From mommy 1 minute na me connecting me a feed they make me day. And him say I say will be a home feed so. And then Jumedia many mun never trip your home come on. A dear the ato so no eso. Now so me hope say you bet me iron and come kakra na yenyamu aba so we can get something from it. And please let me know if the preference to go with English or mix it up. I think I've noticed most of the presenters used English, and I'm okay doing that. But medbe Franco, where necessary. To just let you know, as Kwame mentioned, no, my background is similar to many of us immigrants, first generation immigrants from Ghana. I grew up in Ghana. Your woman Wokofiase, Asante Kofiase. And then part of my early life I spent in Ashanti Mampong. Then went to Kumasi. Eventually went to primary college, did pharmacy in Ghana, and then moved here to the US to find those greener pastures that we are all looking for. and then took a long path to go into medicine. I attended Harvard Medical School, and then went to Yale School of Medicine for my internal medicine residency. I completed residency last year, and now I work for the state of Connecticut as a primary care doctor in the mental health and addiction services. So I take care of the primary physical health issues that are also common in patients or people with mental health. And so that's partly why this topic also is important to me. But it's also important to me because I do value education a lot. And I think we all will understand that education without a healthy mental being is going to be near impossible, which is why we need to make our mental health, our mental well being, a priority. Nti mepɛ sɛ yɛbɛbusa yɛn ho to begin with no. Bi a wobɛbusa ho sɛ na yɛka mental health aseɛ ne sɛ mental health aseɛ ne sɛ da biara na deɛ metae de akyerɛkyerɛ mu ne sɛ nipa yɛ honam akɔ ne nyinaa, our body is divided into parts, and when you come into healthcare and medicine, we tend to specialize in different aspects of the body parts. It so happens that the brain, which is the center of our mental functioning, is also part of the body. But a lot of the conditions that affect that mental part of the body, tend to be sidelined. And it's gotten to a point where it's now a big issue in our society. And I can imagine that it's also a big issue in our church community, which is why I thank God that we can get this opportunity to discuss this important issue, especially at a time when many of you are excited and have completed, very, very commendable milestones in your education and are looking to move on to the next stages of your lives. I want you to know that your mental health is probably one of the biggest assets you have, especially for us as young people. What is mental health? Your mental health is a combination of your emotional wellness, how well you're able to regulate yourself emotionally, taking the spectrum of joy, happiness, excitedness to fear, sadness, confusion, how well you're able to regulate those. It's also a component of your psychological resiliency, right? How well you can actually really handle the depth of psychological stresses that come with that came with your education, and that will certainly come your way even as you step into the workforce or go on to the next phase of your education. And mental health is also comprised of your social well-being. We are social beings, and we enjoy the opportunity to socialize. Our ability to do that well is tied strongly to our mental health. So if you talk about what is mental health, it's really the state where you can consider yourself someone who is emotionally well regulated, someone who is psychologically grounded, and someone who is socially doing well enough to contribute to relationships and take away from relationships. All that come together to really build up what your mental wellness or your mental health. Why is this important? And I used really our flyer for this week to try to make this point. I think as you all have noticed, your leaders have organized very important talks and opportunities for you to enrich yourselves with a lot of information and resources, including how to be financially literate, how to build wealth. But I'm afraid to say that if you cannot really be well mentally, you may not be able to tap into all these resources to the fullest. So the reason why we need to prioritize our mental health is that we, especially as young people, right, one of the biggest assets that we have is our mental capacity, is our mental wellness. And so if you're going to learn about financial education and wealth building, learn about how to invest in your child's education and career opportunities, career journeys, I think it's appropriate that we have a chance to talk about our mental health. How can we prioritize it, even if we don't have any mental illness, so to say? Another reason that we need to be able to prioritize our mental health is that, as I've already mentioned, your mental capacity, your mental health is really determined, or it affects how you feel about yourself and the world around you, which then influences how you're able to solve problems, how you're able to cope with stress, how you are able to overcome challenges, build relationships, and connect with others. And all of these are affected by your mental health. So it's important that we prioritize our mental health. So if you were to ask me, does it mean that if we say that someone has a mental, does the term mental health mean anything? Or what does it mean to say mental health as opposed to mental illness? Your mental health, just like any other health issue, similar to what we say physical health, right? It is really a state of your mental and emotional well-being. Compared to mental illness, right? On the other hand, mental illness is really a state when we say this mental and emotional well-being is off to a certain degree. And so you're not able to function to the degree that we would expect you to function mentally. Mental health is as important as your physical health. And it's possible that sometimes you can have poor mental health without having mental illness. And this is a very important point I want you to understand. Some of the times that you may feel that you have poor mental health are the times when you are in college, for instance, you're in high school, you are working, and you're working hard, and you feel stressed. There's something going on in your life, in your family, and you feel fearful, right? There are certain situations that you're trying to cope with that oftentimes would be short lived, and you would be expected to bounce out of those or even swing through the ups and downs of those stressful moments without losing your functional being or your functionality. The times when those stresses and those fearful states become illnesses is when you lose your functionality. So not everybody who has poor mental health, right, has mental illness. But when you have poor mental health, it is more likely that you could develop mental illness if it's not addressed, if you don't find strategies to address it. And that ends up becoming a mental illness when the chemistry in the brain that sometimes regulate your fears, that sometimes regulate your joy, that sometimes regulate your courage, right, your sense of self-esteem, when those chemicals, right, feel off balance to a point where you're no longer functional, then we say you have mental illness. And mental illness uh, includes a variety of disorders and symptoms. In the US, about 1 in 5 people would be considered people with mental illness. And then 1 in 20 of people would be considered to have serious mental illness. This is actually the population that I work with in the state of Connecticut. These are people who are often very non-functional and are at the very end of the spectrum of mental illness where they cannot really function in the community, and the state has to come in and find strategies to help them get back on their feet. I want you to know that mental illness develops as a result of multiple factors. There are some that are biological, and by biological, some folks would means genetics, meaning something that you are born with or you're predisposed to because of your ancestral heritage, right? Or ancestry, genetics. But there's also a component that we call epigenetics, which is how much your environment, which is how much the politics of our society, which is how much the the built environment that we live in, the society, influences and can speed up your mental illness. So at the end of the day, I want you to remember that your mental health challenges are real. They are common, but they are treatable. They are also preventable if you can prioritize the strategies to be able to maintain the mental healthy mental state, if I may say. They're common, so common that over 60% of even, I use college students here, but there's a lot of studies that have demonstrated this, even in high school students and elementary school students, right? About 60% of students reported that they had one or more mental health problems, including addiction and substance use, mood disorders like anxiety, depression, eating disorders, personality disorders, and disorders like obsessive compulsive disorder, OCD, ADHD, and other disorders that may be considered broadly within the mental health framework. But what I want you to understand is that as young as we are in this age group, right, it is less likely for you to worry about your physical health because you are less likely to have hypertension, for instance, if it's not because of any genetic predisposition. You're less likely to have diabetes. You're less likely to have stroke, a heart attack, right? So sometimes it's even easier for us to say when it comes to health talks and these issues, for us to really brush it aside and feel like we are invincible. But I want you to know that in the US and across the world, young people die more because of suicide than most of the physical health issues that I mentioned, right? It is the second most common cause of death in children and youth. It is second only to accidental deaths. And there was a study that showed that about 660 or so thousand young people died, from suicide in 1 year across the world. So this is a very important problem, to the extent that we know our mental health affects how we actually interact with people, how we succeed in our careers, how we succeed in our relationships. Even in the absence of the risks of suicide and depression and the very severe forms of mental illness, it is important that we prioritize our mental health. And I hope that I am not overstating that piece. Why do I say this? Because I want us to actually face the reality that both within our Ghanaian community, African community, and especially within our faith community, the Seventh-day Adventist Church, if I may say, it is possible that we would entertain stigma around mental health, and we would even practice the stigma on mental health to the extent that we would brush away issues when our kids bring them up at a young age, to the extent that we may not necessarily take it seriously when some of our friends um, either verbalize these symptoms or show them in other ways that should have raised concerns about them. And so, first and foremost, for us to be able to prioritize mental health in our community, we have to curb the stigma that we have within our church community, the stigma that we have within our social community. And I want to actually present to you that even within our own faith community, Mrs. White, Ellen White, was someone who suffered from mental illness. I was a bit surprised when I came across this quote from the testimonies to the church, that someone who was as spiritual as we all aspire to be, who would be considered as close to God as we all aspire to be, would write a letter to her fellowship and tell them, for years I've been afflicted with dropsy, which is edema, which seemed to be more of a physical issue, edema and disease of the heart, which has had a tendency to depress my spirits and destroy my faith and courage. And she described having felt no desire to live. Can you imagine that this is actually on the spectrum of what we call major depressive disorder, to the point that she may have what we would even worry about suicide, and being unable to muster enough faith even to pray for my recovery. And that is really the feeling of hopelessness that characterizes a lot of mental illnesses, especially with depression. So mental health illnesses and mental health problems are common, they're serious, they are real, and we need to face them. More importantly, they're real and they're common and they're possible within our own church community, within our own family, within our own friends, and within our own personal beings, to a point where you need to be aware of who you are and where you are swinging from your day-to-day say spectrum of fear, hopelessness, sadness, right, stress. And if you're getting to a point like that, I want you to understand that it's real and that you're not alone, right? And I want to encourage our church community, our friends, and our families to really help us curb this stigma that has built up around mental health, and even more so in our youth. So this is really the main set of points that I want to dwell on. And I want to dwell on these because at the end of the day, like I said, it's going to be hard to talk to the youth group about heart attacks or strokes or diabetes, because the chances that you are going to develop these this year or in a few years might be much lower than you developing some of these mental health issues that we're talking about. And it's because the mental health problems are more common for the young people than some of the physical health issues. So how do you prioritize your mental health? I want to pause here and ask for some input. How have people been prioritizing their mental health? I really want to get some responses before I even delve into some of these. Because I love to discuss and understand the audience that we have here before I repeat things that you may already know. How do you prioritize your mental health? Especially for those who are graduating now, I want you to be able to share with us. How did you go through your 4 years of college or your 4 years of high school, prioritizing your mental health to come out of it as successful as you are now?
I can talk. For me, I think I meditated a lot whenever I felt like I was getting overwhelmed, using an app called Headspace, or just like going out and taking a walk in nature for me.
Awesome. Thank you. Is that Manuela?
hmm
Manuela, thanks a lot. So meditation, right? Manuela used meditation and walks. And part of that is that what does meditation do for you? It grounds you in your own reality, right? When you're stressed in school, when you're stressed about work, when you're stressed about family issues, and sometimes it feels like you're not living in a real world, you're really doubting who you are, you're doubting where you are. Meditation can help to ground you in where you are, who you are, and what really matters. I found that also helpful, Manuel, really during my, and I will tell you that I did not become so aware about my mental health until I started medical school, guys. And I had to suffer through some of these conditions to understand what matters to me. That's why I listed some of these strategies. They are not pills, they are not specific apps, but they're broadly strategies that I think if you can really characterize these strategies into your life, then you can start to fit specific things in there. So, for instance, what Manuel just suggested, taking a walk, you can put that under your physical health, right? Taking, having meditations, you can put it under several different of these categories. Seeking help, right? Finding purpose. Depending on where and how you're meditating, it could be under your community, right? Who else? How did you prioritize your mental health during these past few years that you were in college, you were in high school?
I think one other way that you can do is like surrounding yourself with good people, people that are not gonna like add to your stress that you're already going through.
Hmm.
And if you feel like you're going through that, just walk away. It's not worth it.
Right. Thanks, Asante. So surrounding yourself with good people, that's part of what I've also put out here, and it can be part of these two. Build relationships. That means you want to be intentional about the kinds of relationships that you develop, and be intentional about how much you invest in those relationships. I will tell you that many of our students, when we're going about our activities, we don't necessarily think about how much our friends and our family members actually help us through until we don't have them no more, until school is we're getting, school is almost over. That's when you realize, wait, this has been my routine. I've been, pretty much hitting the gym with this guy for so many weeks that now it's beginning to feel more stressful when I'm not doing it or when they are not around here. My mom has been calling me almost every Saturday to check on me, right? Or I've been calling my family every Saturday to check on them. Or I've been going to church every Sabbath. I've been singing in the church choir so much that I take it for granted. And now, when I have to be away for some time and that's not there, I realize that actually I'm not feeling whole mentally. Guys, I have come to value my church community. So I went to Harvard Medical School, and for those, I spent a fifth year doing research. For those 5 years, I always say that it was the church community that carried me through some of the very challenging moments, right? There were moments when you would feel as a black man and one of only 5 students among 200 like students in my year, right? Where you would feel like you just don't belong here. And I can believe that that is a very common feeling among us, right? The feeling of imposter syndrome that people talk about, that you feel so alone that you are in this space, you are doing well, your family thinks that you're doing well, but you get up every morning, walk into class, and you're like, I don't know if I can make this work. I don't know if I belong here enough, right? Because maybe some professor told you something so racist, something so condescending. And I'll tell you that it was the church community that allowed me to get through those moments in Harvard. It was I looked forward to every Sabbath going in and like just being me, because this was the life I had lived growing up, and I found meaning doing that. So for me, those years at Harvard and even through my residency here at Yale, it was the relationships that I invested in, the community, the church community especially, and purpose, finding purpose in the things that I did within the church community, the things that I continue and hope to be able to do in and outside the church community and outside of school. Those were the things that actually allowed me to really nurture my mental health, so that I was able to compartmentalize what happens in school, what happens at work, and what happens at home. And if you can find opportunities to actually be intentional about these things, it will help you as a young person who's just about to start a career, as a young person who's just about to go to graduate school, for instance, or as a as a freshman going to college. You need to be deliberate and actually take account now, if you can, say before you go to the final weeks leading to your next semester, take a sheet of paper and write down all these things in these categories. What are the relationships that you have built, that you value, that you nurture while you're in college, while you're working a very hard job, while you're in a new marriage, while you're in a new job? What is the community that has seen you through these past few years that you would want to maintain and sustain? What is your purpose? And this could be a whole sermon. What is your purpose? One of the biggest pieces about a lot of the mental health conditions that I see in my hospital is actually about the sense of self, the sense of purpose that people lose when we all are grappling with the same stresses or similar stresses, to the point that, say, a 13 credit semester begins to feel overwhelming to the point that someone has to get hospitalized, right? While somebody else is thriving and hitting all A's, and or somebody else is thriving and hitting B's and C's and D's, but still really doing well in other aspects of their lives. It's because when we lose the sense of purpose, our sense of self, a lot of things tend to actually fall through the cracks. And I want you to prioritize that. If you don't know what your purpose is in this life now that you're graduating, that you're about to go to college, that you're still in college, I want you to really take this seriously and create a map. What is my purpose now? It can be as simple as I just want to live day to day. I want to wake up and say good morning every morning to my family, to my wife, to my kids, to my sister, to my brothers. I want to serve the church. I want to serve the community. You find that purpose, you create relationships, you build community, you create boundaries, and that is something I'll talk about again. But I'm going to pause here. I want to hear a little bit more. What have people tried? That was Asante's point that I delved into. That you build, you really surround yourself with good people, people who can actually help you maintain a healthy mental state. What else? What other strategies have people used to prioritize their mental health?
Can I say something?
Sure.
Probably mine will be very strange, but whenever I feel stressed and overwhelmed, I go to my closet and I cry. I will cry, like I'll like me crying my guts out, like crying. And after I cried and feel okay, I'll take my kids to the park and seeing them walking around, running around, playing around, help me meditate.
Mm.
So that is that is how I cope with whenever things are not going or stressed out or my mental health is over the roof. Thank you, that's mine.
Thank you, Susanna. Thanks a lot for sharing that. I am hearing that you actually have connected a physical act, right, to this mental health, mental state that we all are talking about that we can't quite name, right? it's important that you know what grounds you. I'm glad that you found that, hey, you've even created space, your closet, so that when you know you're headed that way, you know that, hey, no, I'm going to get some wellness there. I'm going to cry and be well. And I tell you that when you do that, your brain begins to really produce a lot of the dopamine, the reward hormone that allows us to feel fulfilled. That's what I see. That's what happens, right? So it's not surprising that you do that, and then begin to take your kids for a walk, and see them do play and find joy in that, because the dopamine now has really set your brain to actually notice joy, to notice what is meaningful, to notice what is important, and actually then becomes your purpose, to find purpose in the little things that others would actually ignore. So I really appreciate your point, Susanna. Really identifying a physical space in your own corner, which is your closet now. So that's one of the practical strategies, guys. You should be able to find a physical space if you can, in addition to really building relationships, community, creating boundaries, finding purpose, and seeking help. Thank you, Susanna. I'll take a last one or two. How do you prioritize your mental health?
All right, I will say this. Sometimes taking a walk is a way of helping me in order to stay focused and get rid of certain things, some negative thought that will come in mind. Thank you.
Thank you. Yes, so taking a walk, right? The physical activity you're doing there, there's a lot of reasons why you would feel good about it. Your brain will be releasing a lot of the feel good hormones, the dopamine that I talked about. But even as you even start that walk, you realize you begin to feel a little bit tired. Your heart is beating. You're taking in deeper breaths, right? You become more aware of your body. That in itself is meditational. And if you don't do that, I want to encourage you to even do a little bit of that. When you're stepping out to your walk, start noticing something like your steps, how your feet is hitting the ground, right? How how you're really taking in breaths. Start to even picture how your lungs are opening up, right? And create small moments on that walk to experience each of these physical bodily changes. And they all connect to actually make you feel better. But what you're doing most importantly then is actually you're also really using your physical health activities to maintain your mental health. So for some other people, it might be hitting the gym, right? For some people, it might be going on a run. It might be going to dance Zumba or dance Kete, Adwa, whatever you call it, right? But I appreciate that a lot. Any other final thoughts? How do you prioritize your mental health? And then I'll go through some of the points that I haven't talked about already. Okay. So at this point, I think we've all
Can,
established that. Go
you can
ahead.
have enough sleep, having enough sleep.
Yes, I think that should even have taken its own space here. Sleep, 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 sleep. I would throw that under physical health, but it should actually have its own space. Sleep, 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 sleep. You need to have your brain reset, because everything we've talked about your mental well-being is how your brain is working, right? To help you solve problems, to help you maintain and build relationships and cope with stress. And if you're not sleeping, what happens physically and biologically is that if you're not getting adequate sleep, your body begins to actually switch into what we call a fight or fright mode, right? It feels as if you're being chased. Imagine yourself that way, like someone is chasing you, that your life is at risk, and that your body begins to switch on these hormones that would switch on if you were in the jungle and a lion was chasing you, the fight or flight. You have small amounts of those hormones now really trickling up, as you lose sleep and lose sleep and lose sleep, to the point where you begin to feel anxious so much. Any little thing, you are so anxious, you're so fearful, right? And the things that everybody else would be able to cope with, any fearful thing that anybody would be able to cope with, like an exam, like speaking in public, like writing a paper, right? You begin to actually lose control of those emotions because you've lost so much sleep. The fight or flight hormones are up, and now you can't even really regulate yourself. So sleep is so important, and thank you for sharing that. If that's Collins.
I have one more. I tried to unmute myself, but I don't think you guys could hear me.
Sorry, Susan. Go ahead.
This is Asantua. I'm Suzanne's niece.
Yeah.
But for me, when I'm going through something mentally, I like to clean a lot. Even if my room is not a mess, I would intentionally make a mess and clean it up. Because in my head, it feels like I'm clearing up whatever's bothering me, if that makes sense.
I see. How did you notice that about yourself?
Well, I grew up cleaning a lot.
Hmm.
Before I used to hate it, but now I feel like it's kind of like a coping mechanism because my hands are busy and I'm focused on whatever I need to do instead of whatever is going on in my mind, if
Wow.
that makes sense.
Wow, it makes sense to me now. Susan, I'm sorry, Asantua, right?
Yes.
Thank you. Thank you so much for sharing that, guys. What I'm hearing is you used to clean a lot, you hated it, but it turns out that part of your coping strategy now for stress has been that now I'm actually going to take this thing that I used to hate and make it therapeutic, right? So that when I feel so stressed, I'm going back to something that I used to do that like it comes so easy for me now. And it's very important, guys, that we actually find that it's partly you're creating purpose for yourself, Susanna. That's why it makes sense to me, right? You're like, I can even create a mess so that I can clean it. And then now assume that I'm cleaning up all the stress or I'm cleaning up all the things that I'm worried about, right? Um, it's so important. I think the question I asked you afterwards is how did you realize that? That question was meant to make a point to everyone that you've got to be able to understand what works for you. You have to be able to understand what brings you joy, what brings you fear, what brings you meaning, what brings you purpose. I think one of our sisters mentioned they've been able to do it enough to realize that whenever they are stressed and they can't handle it, they said, when my mental health is up to the roof, I go to my closet and cry and then take my kids to for a walk. That's an important process. And this way, your brain now is actually really solidified. It's become a coping strategy for you. I want to really pitch that to any and everyone who feels like they don't know how to practically prioritize their mental health. Is that one, you first have to understand that mental health is a huge asset. You don't know it until you lose it. And that there is a state where you can have poor mental health without having mental illness. And that state of poor mental health can even affect your productivity. It can affect your relationships to the point where any little thing really irritates you and you begin to drive people away from you. And then it gets to a point now where you're isolating yourself and now you're feeling sad, you're feeling hopeless, and it becomes what we call depression, which is now a mental illness. So I want you to understand that you have an asset, which is your mental health, which has not been lost and should not be lost. If you can prioritize that health with some of these practical tips that people have shared, and some of these tips that I would bundle into these categories, I am sure that God is going to help really maintain that health nurture it, and it's going to be the biggest asset for you. The points that I'm making here are that as young people, one of the biggest assets you have is your body, your mental fortitude, capacity, the capacity to learn, soak in as much as you can about this world, in this world, about God, and build and create solutions to the problems that even make us stress out. But if you can do that, you're going to need to prioritize your mental health. How you do that is to really invest in relationships, healthy relationships, like Asante mentioned. Build a community. Know what community actually has sustained you to now, and be deliberate about that. Invest in those communities. I always tell people, like, if you're singing in the youth choir and you feel like somebody has to force you to do it because you're doing it for, say, Uncle Richmond or some auntie, you don't know what you're missing out. You don't know what you're about to lose, which is community. Because a lot of the patients that I see in my hospital, you will notice that even when we think they are functionally able to go out, some of them are trying and forcing to do like some of the craziest things so that we can keep them there because they don't know how to even sustain themselves or exist in a community. So we're blessed to have that. And I want you to actually know that and nurture that. Be deliberate about how much you give into this community and how much you take from this community. The next thing is I want you to prioritize your physical health by taking walks, like somebody says, which is maintain a physical activity at least 30 minutes, 5 times a week, right? Of moderate to vigorous activity, such as walking briskly, right, to a point where you're almost out of breath if you can. And you want to mix that both with aerobic activities, things like running, walking, treadmills, as well as weight bearing activities or muscle things that also build your muscles, right? So doing your push-ups, your pick, pull up bars and other things, going hitting the gym as much as you can. While you do that, I'm going to go here before I go to the rest. Is find purpose. And part of finding purpose actually can fit into building relationships and communities. Guys, if there was anything that has seen me through, like, I'll say very crappy moments in medical school and residency, it was because I found purpose in what I do. Um, and I will share with you my last framework after this slide. While you find purpose, you can actually overwhelm yourself because if part of your purpose is to volunteer for everything and do any and everything that's offered you, you begin to lose boundaries and start to even stress yourself more with the things that you think you find purposeful. So create boundaries even as you find purpose. There is something that people tend to call use the term work-life balance, right? If you want to balance it, balance it. But I have gotten to a point where actually I'm moving away from trying to balance work and life and realizing that my life is work, my work is life. So the things that matter to me in this life include my family, my children, my church community, my work, right? And if something at work, somebody at work is stressing me so much that it's costing me my family, then I have to think about it. There's nothing to balance about that. I have to really maybe figure out the way out of that particular relationship, right? Because if I have to earn the most, and I'll tell you this is the reason why I left Yale for a state job now. I had a colleague, my wife works in the same hospital that I worked before I left Yale. And she mentioned that one of my colleagues met her and she's like, it still surprises me. Like, your husband went to Harvard and came to Yale. I thought he was going to take an academic path. Why? And for me, I have realized now that I love doing academic work, but I would rather be at a place where my purpose is tied to my family, my relationship, my community. So I thank God that things happened last year that were crappy enough at Harvard, that were racist enough at Harvard, at Yale, to allow me to say, do I want to still stay here on this job as a faculty? I will tell you this. I quit that role 1 month before I had to start. And I quit it, and I sit back now and thank God that I did, because now I'm in a job role that allows me to stay, like I don't work on weekends, so I don't work on Sabbaths. I go to work 8 to 4:30 and I'm back home to be able to spend time with my family. I don't take calls, right? If I did not create those boundaries and even sit back to say, is this academic pedestal, is it so meaningful? Is it so important for me to chase it now? Right? I don't think I would have even found that much purpose to enjoy my family now. So one thing that really stands out for me, and I really want to emphasize to you guys, is even as you're starting your jobs, as you're starting your next academic career, learn how to create boundaries. Learn how to respect those boundaries, even as you find purpose. But most importantly, if you feel overwhelmed, find ways to seek help. Seek help. Seeking help could be doing some of the things that Asantua mentioned, doing some of the things some other people mentioned, going to your closet to cry, using an app like Headspace, right, to meditate, sitting and singing as much of the songs that you enjoy, right, walking, running, eating healthy. Seek help. Importantly, seeking professional help also. If you are at a point where you're feeling hopeless, even suicidal, then I need you to call. Talk to somebody. Importantly, call for help. And as I finish and begin to take any input or questions, I want to really present to you this framework that saw me through my medical school and residency. And this has become a sermon that I present mostly to young people. And I always say this, that if you must suffer, right, because we all have to, because we're human, we're in a world full of suffering now, right? If you must suffer, I want you to suffer well. Suffer well. Well means W is suffer with Christ and in the company of believers. That is the relationships and the community that you build. Company of believers, people who believe in you, people who believe in the things you believe in, people who believe in the God that you believe in. Suffer well by enjoying the process. Yes, graduate school is going to suck, right? But if you can enjoy that process, put a certain purposeful framework to it. While you do that, exalt God, exalt others. If people are doing well in things that you don't do well, give them their glory. Give God the glory for the things that you do well and the things that you can do well if you sit up. Suffer well by learning. Learn, learn, learn. Keep learning. Find yourself. Love yourself. That's the most important thing. A lot of mental health issues start and worsen because it's hard for us as young people to even find ourselves, to find who we are, and even love that who we are. And I went through a process to get to this place that I can even share this with you. Find and love yourself, my friends. Suffer well by living your testimony. The things that God does for you, the things that people do for you, things that people do to show you love. Live that testimony. Boast about the good things. Boast about the bad things and the ugly things. At the end, all that is what is going to make you a complete human being. All that's what's going to make you a successful person. All that is going to make you mentally healthy, right? So that you have emotional wellness, so that you have psychological resilience, so that you can really enjoy your social connections and be successful. These are some of the frameworks that I would recommend to you as young people who are pursuing education, as young people who are about to really step out into the world or continue wherever you are. And I appreciate you giving me audience, also chiming in with your input. I'm going to pause here and call for any questions or suggestions. Thank you.
I was afraid that Dr. George asked it. That was very extensive presentation about mental health. Now, before we come up with any questions, no, Dr. George, something that he does for the community, including Ghanaians, immigrants, and the students, of friend higher ground initiative, And I'll just give him 5 minutes to talk about higher ground initiative. And like we always do, if after this presentation you have any question, any follow-up, we can find a way to get you in contact with Dr. George now. One more guidance. And before any questions or comments comes now, Doc, when it's over to me, my overview of what higher ground initiative is about and how it's helping when it comes to telehealth and education. Then we move on to the questions and contributions.
Thank you. Yo, Midasi, thanks a lot. So higher ground initiatives is my when I go back, let me go back here. It's really my purpose. It's what how I've tried to find purpose, right? And actually, it started one day when I was coming out of one rotation, my first year of residency at Yale, in a very stressful moment. But then there was this tune, Lord, lift me up that I stand by faith on heaven's tableland, a higher place that I have found. Lord, plant my feet on higher ground. And no, yeah, me theme song. And really, it's become as a consultancy that I run now. The most important piece that might be relevant to our group here, yeah, career development and career coaching. Understanding that many of us, first and second generation um, African immigrant families, um, we're forceful, we're smart, we're talented, but a lot of opportunities go by us because we don't know how to leverage some of the opportunities that exist in our colleges and in our communities. So I do work with students, both those who just came from Ghana or tried to find a path into certain careers, um, and even early career professionals who are also exploring opportunities that I can support them with. Um, I, I do develop, sometimes I work with organizations to develop, say, what I call work-based learning opportunities. So this summer and last summer, I started this last summer with Yale, where we trained like 8 students as medical scribes. These are first generation low income students who otherwise would not find clinical shadowing opportunities. So what I did was I developed this medical scribing course, and then over 8 weeks they take some of that online, and then we do career development programs, bringing them to the hospital, finding them mentors who align with them, so that these students can now actually see themselves in healthcare. I'm doing a second year of this program at Yale through a grant, and part of it is to expand it into our Ghanaian and Afro-Caribbean community, to a point where, say, next summer, if there were students who are interested in healthcare and other science, technology, engineering professions, we can create something, say, for a church community over the summer and have students enroll in it and find mentorship for them, so that it becomes a longitudinal career building opportunity where students who want to become doctors, nurses, um, pharmacists get to actually take a class that can help them find a job, for instance, in healthcare, and then work with some of our the people in our network. That's something that I do and will continue to do. Um, Besides that, I'm also really building my own telehealth practice to be able to take care of some of our people, both here in Ghana, in the US, but also be our parents. You want me to take care of them, their primary care, chronic disease, chronic illnesses, then I can take care of them through telehealth. I have a nurse team back in Ghana that can actually go visit them, take their blood pressure, and help manage their chronic illnesses from here. So these are two activities that I'm doing, and I think it comes down to me asking myself some questions around what's going to matter for my mental health, for my wellness, financial wellness, even there. And that is the purpose I've found, and I'm happy to really continue to do that. If there were opportunities to develop programs like that with people here or with communities that reach out.
All right, okay, that's it. You take few questions about the presentation, and then maybe a question about what he just talked about higher grounder. Just one or two, three questions. Then we will end the program. Like I said, so if I say we'll contact now, I can get you in contact. Then we can move from there, like we always do every year. Any questions or contributions are welcome.
I want to ask the question. So, my question is, I don't know if you can hear me.
I can hear you.
Yes, thank you. So, my question is, if you have a teenager growing up, they say they have their phrase, they have the part in their life where they tend to be quiet and not speak that much and always want to keep it to themselves. So, in this stage, how will you know as a parent that your kid is not at that teenager stage, but really going through something?
Hmm. It's a very important question, right? Because as you put it, there's a phase of our development that is just that, where we want to keep to ourselves, right? Especially those early adolescence stage, um I think when mental health issues or these behaviors, right, you realize that a lot of them can be normal. They can be the normal ways that we're coping with things in our lives. So even if there was something major going on in this kid's life, right, and that's how they're coping with it, the goal is that it does not take away their function, right? So they don't become the kid who is bedbound and inbound to the point where they're not even getting up to eat, to the point where they're not getting up to do things that they would normally enjoy even alone, right? To the point that they would begin to even start saying things that are very, very unusual about them. Those would be the extremes that you should notice and call out in a respectful way, in in a in a productive way. I use productive intentionally because in our typical Ghanaian homes, the way we even notice and name those can be provoking, right? And if you have a kid like that, right, depending on the age group, now Shana said it's unusual. Say, okay, be crana. Sa age group na wawa, but in about 6 weeks and in Washa say it take this I'll say tendency to isolate, tendency to ignore social connections and anka be or enjoy dada or social activities and anka be anim say or no the any he will take a certain interest in it. Then at least use that opportunity to name it to them respectfully and productively. If you feel you may not be productive, find the right person to their primary care or pediatrician, right, doctor, um, a church leader, or even one of your friends, if you can do that without um, affecting their privacy, right? It's a challenging issue, but I tell you that because we're social beings, right? If you can try and keep trying to a point, there's a time when you might hit a nerve. It might sometimes just be just sitting with them in that quiet space and letting them notice that you notice that they are isolating and that you're there with them. It might just be that. I think that's really how I'm going to put it, because it's some of these scenarios, no, you can have it and have the normal versions of it where you don't even have to poke anything, just leave them be, and they may just come out of it. But ideally, if it's taking more than 6 weeks for a kid to do some of the usual expected things, then you're worried that they're getting into some mental illness, and that you should actually start to talk about it with a professional.
Thank you.
Okay.
Okay, kakra me de kan yɛ hwɛ. Sɛ owó ɔba na sɛ anytime biara no will show behavior bi a affecting on the activities of daily living. Who say they say umedidi ɔsɛ dɛ ɔhyɛ dɛm. Time a wɔhwɛ wɔ de kɔ school koraa na ɔnkɔ school. Ne dressing no ɔhu sɛ ne dressing no asesa atare koraa ɔbɛhyɛ koraa na atare no wɔda ne ani. Wɔsɔre a ɔbɛsu saa wobusa n'asɛm a wɔmfi o. There is something wrong. This is not an usual behavior. Affecting the daily living, activities of daily living. Nti ɛwɔ sɛ woyɛ dɛ wobɔ mmɔden sɛ wobɛ consult your friends mental health physician anaasɛ any mental health consultant biara na waboa wo sɛdeɛ ɛbɛyɛ a wobɛtumi afiri yɛm. Wobu w'ani gu so ara na w'anim na wo ho so no na ebi koraa na w'ani ma mu a no koraa akɔ na wakɔbɔ wi bi ama afa ne tirim. Anyɛ saa so a na ebi a wɔde ne ho akɔhyɛ some relationship bi a wonim sɛ wɔyɛ saint na but saa relationship no nipa na breaking the heart. It can be anything. Ebi koraa na school koraa na exams koraa no one perform. There has been teasing bi a ne colleagues ne ho nkɔ ne bɛnti no ama feel so ashamed and depressed. But woba mu no no ɛbɛboa ma asolve ne problem no ama no. Me da say.
Yeah, Mpacho, I have a question, and at the same time, okay, I have a question, right? Like, how can you connect this mental health with now the social media that we have, TikTok, Facebook, Instagram? For this, especially, I'm talking for the middle schoolers, the teenagers, the middle schoolers, and the high schoolers, like bullying, trying to be, peer pressure, making them go crazy, want to be who they are not, but because they are teenagers, their hormones pushing them to do stuff. My question is, how do you connect that with the mental health thing? And also, we as parents, should we be worried more knowing what our kids are doing on social media? Because sometimes you go to TikTok, especially, the things that you see there, it's worrying. So I don't know how you're gonna connect that, and for us, if it's right for us, the parents as well, to know what our kids are doing on social media, especially TikTok and Instagram. Thank you.
I think, sir, that's a very practical question, and it's the reality now. The connection there, and I said, one, sir, akurani enya of age a wunim say or you mature to regulate, self-regulator. I think it's appropriate for you, the parent, to help them and find and create boundaries. The boundary could be as strict as you're not of age to have a social media account like that. And so I'm not going to have you do it, or you're not going to have a phone for that. A lot of times, and I think that the problem is that parent no any that the technological savviness. So because will be some of the parental controls cry to adenoso. Ama I block certain apps and access to certain things. I think this would be the ideal case. Yenisa opportunity nintino. Sa krana nyas akomo awia. A challenging so when you're exposed to a we no benya kwan so o blocking no. Anampo o regulate what they see there. Ni nyinaa etwa si kasachre. It bogs down to have building a relationship with your child to a point where you feel like you can entrust them with that app to make healthy choices about it, to expose themselves to the right content for the right amount of time. Badubusami said, can I connect them this trend in social media and the things that our kids would be exposed to mental health? Yes, I can, and I think that we know that it's one of the leading factors. Because at the end of the day, there's a certain reality about self, right? And then I'm here with NPR. The idea is that nyame boy no krano. Wa moya say yankasi ye hwe ye ho anim sa on say wo hwe we ya. In our human development, we haven't been so used to seeing our own face and our own selves for so long and so frequently, sir, and so detailed, sir. Sabri, phones, any selfies near the normal man abe. Until now, we are more self-aware to the extent that it's affecting a lot of our kids, right? And kids are even now worried about wrinkles under their eyelids. Kids are worried so much about things around their appearance. In fact, it doesn't change anything on the grand scheme of life, no. They begin to actually worry so much about it. They begin to pursue a lot of solutions that are detrimental to their mental health, which is chasing things that people are doing, buying products that people are marketing on there, right? And getting into habits that even begin to affect their financial safety. And the point you make and the point that you raise in this question is very, very salient to what we're talking about. The challenge is that um, the technological gap, no generational technological gap, no, very, very important. And the parent be very rich, say, can a bank call social media cry? Pia we can about this will be obey any day. I think it comes down to, let's see how can you help this kid build a healthy relationship with these tools. At some point, these social media and these technological tools might be helpful to learning, to some form of career activities, right? But how do you help the kid develop a better relationship, a healthy relationship, create boundaries with those tools? It's a problem that I cannot give you the right answers to now. But I really hope that we will be able to have more productive conversations with our kids about that. Patrick, is it helpful? You bet me, Eddie, Kwame. That was my point.
Yeah, okay. My name say every time the crap 4 minutes. And my name say Abia. The no be ma. Like I said, no. Obia any question, Diana, you can reach out to me and we can find a way to get you in contact with Dr. George. Tell him we here be able to Abua. Doc, with it, on behalf of the church pastor, Dr. Kofi and Chadakwa, and I saw him 24. Yeah, that was it. We say and then so what's say omre na only ebekasa. Meaning education elder the between say announcement there was the bien ho there na major amount na what shall so the mind na Agyapong.
Kwame, Idasi, Dr. George, also Idasi Pan. Announcement kakra way new may di and my in no. Saturday, ye prepare for education, graduation, and to be a Okahubia, so prepare. And after a picnic idea and so. Yes, say, Ubi and train inviting Nipa Bear 15. Say Nipa now, mana, as a Bokakwa, and yes, more money as him, yana, young forward the flowers and flyers, no, into me invite Nipa Bebre. Yamisham, watch a young pie. So near Sassini Pura and Yamitim for a dawasi. And then you may so now more quite George so, and in some say a brain. Yes, sir, pass education wiki. Yimi near Yensha, near Yama be brave, a frame. Said a boy, a boa for Franco, I'm yet me a tumpo. And you may the yes, sir, became only shrine. The chichu, a boa for more boy, a man's analogy in I, young Sean, sir. committee gu so mo boa me yenya sa education so eso nsa se boa na de bia omntimi fa de yehia se emre enwumre ye kwa akodeda ye so se bekan ye ho ono mbekọ adwuma omo koda ija omu nyina hye wonsa srai bebre e wo dobo Yesu Kristo din mu nti amen.
When you mess around the way, prayer team, members are watching and the share is here.
Any Mespa.
You want to